Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Yep, same moi. How you doing? June 8th, 2023. Those pictures of New York City, my God. Jeez. Whoa. It ain't so good here, but it's not like that. Wow. And this is our future, they say. Wonderful. Sort of like Mars. All righty. I don't know. There's little hints of some good news around. Might as well start with that. And I hesitate to say this will be considered just beyond the pale, I guess. But to take pleasure in somebody else's leave taking, and by that I mean death. But why am I having trouble connecting to? That is so weird. Kevin, I'm just going to talk to you, my producer. I texted you that I had a guest calling in around 10:30. Jason Togyer, Togyer. It's a former reporter. There's way too many of those, and that's sort of the subject. Okay. I don't know. I seem to have some difficulties. Anyway, I was going to say Pat Robertson's dead, and fine. He is someone I most certainly will not miss, and he is someone who I feel helped get us where we are today by politicizing evangelical Christianity. And I mean, some of the things that he has, wasn't he the one who said that like a hurricane hit Miami because there was a gay parade there or something? I mean, he was just always a smarmy jerk. He said feminists were like akin to witches. He's just an awful human being. So goodbye, Pat Robertson. And he opened the door for other Christianized grifters on television, and whatever. Not somebody whose death I mourn. And another good news. Apparently, is this like, I didn't read this in like the New York Times, or I guess I've seen this on, again, I never know if what I'm saying is true anymore, because I just don't quite know if the sources are the sources that I think they are. But apparently, Mark Meadows, Trump's former chief of staff, has reached some kind of deal with the feds. And I guess this is what I've read. He's going to plead guilty to, lesser crimes than they could have brought against him in exchange for probably ratting on Trump and for some maybe level of immunity. I don't know. Kevin? So I'm not on? Just gotta, well, then why did you say, then how come I just got something saying, are you ready? Excuse me. Well, this is weird. Okay, this is weird this is so some weird snafus are going on. I'm getting your texts. I'm talking to my producer at a way after, I guess, you sent them. I don't know. So something weird's going on. Yeah. Okay. So you've heard me up until now. I'm doing the show. Okay. I forgot what I was talking about. Anyway, whatever. So, there could be charges. I think I said earlier in the week, given the way it works, usually the big news breaks like Thursday afternoon after I'm off, or Friday, and we might see a Trump indictment. But it's coming. There's no doubt that it's coming. There also could be more than one indictment. Some brought in Florida, some brought in D.C. But the reckoning is upon us, which is, I guess, good. All right. So I'm losing. I'm sorry. Things have gotten so weird here. And I think that's the end of my good news. I can't come up with anything else. I don't think. Everything else seems pretty as usual appalling. Oh no, good news. And I think I, toward the end of the show, alluded to this too. Lionel Messi, the great soccer player, as you know probably, is turned down the Saudis, unlike the PGA, said to the Saudis, who were dangling $500 million in front of him to come play there. He said no. And he's coming here to the United States, to Miami or Fort Lauderdale or some. I wish people would stop going to Florida too. I consider Florida somewhat like going to Saudi Arabia. I'm sorry. It's a place that you shouldn't. You shouldn't. They should be shunned. That's my sense. I know a whole ton of you don't agree with me, but that's my sense. Anyway, he said to the Saudis, "Screw you." Not so many words. Pat Robertson was a homophobe, and they're out of the closet big time. And I want to note this because I was with some friends a few nights ago, and one of whom is a new friend, the young gay woman. And she said, "Did you hear there's been a state of emergency called or declared for the LGBTQ community?" I said, "What? I mean, who? Who declared it?" And she wasn't sure. I said, "Well, I doubt that that's something. Didn't come from the government, because if it came from the government, I would think I've heard about it. But I now know who it was. It was the Human Rights Campaign, which is obviously a social justice group that keeps their eye on hate. And they declared a state of emergency for LGBTQ Americans. And, you don't even have to, you can say, oh, well, that's some liberal outfit just trying to blah, 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 blah. Let me give you the Centers for Disease Control. Let me give you them, because, they're just crunching numbers. According to them, 1 in 5 gay, lesbian, or bisexual high school students attempted suicide in the last year. 1 in 5. That's mind-blowing. And don't think it doesn't have something to do with the homophobia unleashed by Republicans and the right and the people who thrive on hate. Look at the Republican legislatures all over this country. They have just this year, and this year isn't even it's almost half over, right? Almost half over. In less than the first 6 months of this year, Republican legislatures have introduced over 525 anti-gay bills. 75 of them have been signed into law this year. And here's the thing. Once something is on the books, once something is signed into law, it takes some doing to get it off. Maybe decades of hard work. Charles Blow, writing in the New York Times today, says, we're going to start seeing a migration. Maybe this is what the homophobes want, to make gay people get up and leave and congregate in more welcoming spaces, escaping the oppression that is legislated by Republican-controlled legislatures and packing up their families, their lives, and running to more welcoming arms. And Blow says, what does that remind you of? It's not unlike migration you saw of Black Americans in the Jim Crow era. And he then said, in fact, you could call this era the birth of Jim Queer. So most Americans, we had been told, had come around about gay rights. But I'm starting to wonder. 70% of Americans 2 years ago said they knew a gay person, which is to say 30% said they didn't know a gay person. I don't even know how that's possible. They do know a gay person. They just don't know they're gay. I don't know. I don't know how. Anyway, but when it comes to trans people, and it's the trans community, that smaller part of the gay community, that is the real target right now, because it's so small. And that's what bullies do. They attack the weak, the smallest. So when Americans are asked, do you know a gay person? 70% say, yeah, sure. But when they're asked, do you know a trans person? It's a much smaller number. As a matter of fact, it's 1 in 5, which is the same number of high school, right? It was 1 in 5 gay high school students tried to kill themselves this last year. So It's pointed out that because a lot of people don't know a trans person. In fact, if you ask Americans, have you ever seen a ghost? You know what the number is? 1 in 5 Americans say they've seen a ghost. I think that's a fitting metaphor. 1 in 5 say they've seen a ghost. 1 in 5 say they've seen a trans person. Jim Queer. LGBTQ state of emergency. Hug your gay friends. We have a call. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I'm sorry. I wanted to say that did you see Trump? Good chance he's going to pick that Barry Lake for his running mate.
Well, I know that's what she wants, and they seem like a wonderful couple.
I think so. See,
a great
I
pair.
He's not going to the White House. He's going to the big house. So, we believe it now. I really believe it. And I didn't before. I was really skeptical. But now I think you can't dodge all those charges. You can't. He'd have to be a Houdini. That's right. Yes.
They're coming too fast and furiously. Yeah. And it's not as if the evidence isn't just screaming from the rooftops. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, many of these crimes are crimes almost committed right in front of us.
I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't sell so many secrets. I mean, that's
of
how
course.
bad I think it's going to be.
Of course. He doesn't give stuff away. Right.
So I think he knows his goose is cooked. I really do think he's white knuckled, as they said. So he's worried.
Yeah, good. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
I'm happy.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
Some of the good news. Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, I have to tell you, I have been warned by my my provider, happens to be Xfinity, that they're making my system better in my neighborhood and there might be some interruptions. Well, I'm having an interruption. I can't get anything opened on my computer's not working. I still got my phone, but I'm missing quick access to some of the information I wanted to share with you. And before I get off my rant about the homophobia in this country, I also want to point out that there had been a plan to have, and this is one of the things I can't get at because Xfinity is fixing things, making them better. And you know that so often in order to make things better, they apparently have to get worse first. There had been, I don't know if it was called a gay mass, but a mass that was going to be celebrated at Duquesne University, I think, as part of Pride Month. Something, that would be a welcoming, telling Catholic gays that this was a welcoming place. In fact, they did that last year. I don't know if it was at Duquesne, but there was a mass during Pride Month last year that did that. This year, some right-wingers, namely the Daily Signal, that's a right-wing outfit owned by the Right-Wing Heritage Foundation, they found out about this planned mass. And lo and behold, guess what happened? Duquesne University and the Pittsburgh Catholic Diocese were inundated with threatening calls, emails, whatever. Bishop Zubik said, I do have this on my phone, they were responding to a flyer that was going out about, that was promoting the gay mass. Zubik said, many of the responses to the flyer jumped to the conclusion that I gave approval to this event. I did not, Bishop said. Many of the responses also used condemning and threatening, and some might say hateful language, not in keeping with Christian charity. Okay, let me just say this. Bishop Zubik saying that these threatening emails and calls the diocese has been getting contained what some might say hateful language. Why would he qualify what surely was hateful language? That part of it, even more than him sidestepping and closing the whole thing down, which is what he did, infuriates me. Some might say hateful. And those who wouldn't say hateful, Bishop Zubik, who might they be? Hateful people. So, the people who were putting this thing together were told by the diocese and by Duquesne University that the on-campus mass would not be held. It was canceled. And the little bit I have here from WESA, I think it is, when asked for comment, the university, being really brave and courageous, forwarded Bishop Zubik's letter, but didn't respond to his specific questions. And that's the end of that. So the right-wingers, the Heritage Foundation, and some haters scared and tormented and threatened the diocese and the university, Duquesne, to cancel a mass that was intended only to welcome and to provide a safe place for Catholic gay people. God. Profiles in courage. So, really extraordinary. I happen to, I'm in trouble here because I can't get any of my information up. I can't get it up. What are we going to do here? Got any complaints? Call Comcast Infinity or whatever. I can't get this thing that I wanted to share with you. Someone wrote this wonderful piece in the Atlantic about people who watch television with the subtitles on, even if they're, they can hear, but they choose to watch all their television with subtitles on. And the author is just so freaked out by this and ends up writing a really fascinating piece about the phenomenon and why it's happening And if you're one of the people who does that, and I must say I am, I mean, I can watch without them, but I think the default on my TV is set for captioning. And as such, it's there if I want it. I don't know that it might make my ear lazy, but I do find it helpful in some instances where there's lots of dialogue, especially with accents. And if it's quick paced dialogue where I really have trouble. Now, I'm sure my ears, being 75 plus years old, are not as good as they used to be. So I do it, but it raises all kinds of issues. And the article goes into them, and I'll hope maybe when next I'm able to access that information, we can talk about it. And some of it has to do, if you do find yourself having trouble hearing dialogue on and when you're watching the TV, it's not you. It is the streaming service, or it's HBO, or it's Netflix. They all have their own. Well, I don't know what the gizmo is that modulates, that deals with the audio and how it's sent out. And in a lot of them, they make no effort to pull the dialogue out and give it a little more of a boost if there's a lot of other noise happening. And God knows there's often a lot of other noise happening. And so if you find yourself really struggling to hear, it's never the person who first created the movie or the show. It is the person, like friggin' Comcast, I think, who is providing it to you, refusing to care about the quality of the audio. Anyway, you know how screwed up my computer is? I just got an email, just right now, from Milton. God bless you, Milton. That says, you are definitely on. That would have come in, I guess, about a half hour ago. Milton must have sent me that. So things are really, oh my God. Jeez. What a. So the good news is I am being saved by Jason Togyer. Jason, are you there?
I think I'm here. Are we on?
Yes.
Can Milt email us and let us know if we're on?
Well, but we'll get that afternoon. So I don't think I'm having a really impossible time. But I'm so glad you're on. I hear you loud and clear, Lee. And I want to tell you, I really enjoyed the book. Jason is one of four journalists whose work in compilation created a book called American Deadline, reporting from 4 news-starved towns in the Trump era. You know, Jason, what I find most interesting is that the whole idea of this thing was upended in some respects by the pandemic, right? Yep. Explain what the initial purpose of the book was, and then how a thing called COVID-19 blindsided it and made it, I think, in many ways, even more compelling.
That little thing, COVID-19, yeah. So that one. Yeah. So the backstory is that at the end of 2015, I run a little website in McKeesport called Tube City Online. And at the end of 2015, we lost our local newspaper, the McKeesport Daily News. It was one of the papers that had been purchased by the late Richard Mellon Scaife. And when he passed away and the Tribune Review was selling off its assets, that paper and the newspaper down in Monessen were two of the papers that closed. So we ramped up what we were doing at our little nonprofit and tried to fill in some of the gap around the news coverage. I was contacted, or actually, something like, I don't remember how many hundreds of daily newspapers have closed in the United States since 2010.
I know. I've got the, Jason, I have the number right here. 2,100.
Okay, that sounds right to me. Yeah. So 2,100
dailies have vanished.
Newspapers have vanished.
Yeah.
I mean, and big ones too, right? I mean, big newspapers have failed. So what happened was a friend of mine at Penn State Greater Allegheny campus in McKeesport was contacted by Columbia University, and they were looking for communities where a newspaper had closed in different parts of the country, and they wanted to talk to some local journalists who could basically, ahead of the 2020 presidential election, send them a monthly article about the town where the newspaper closed. And Zach Furness at Penn State had them contact me. And that was the original premise, was that we were going to be covering the election from these different towns around the United States, and then sending them a dispatch every month as to, in McKeesport or the other communities, Macon or McAllen, Texas. Yeah. What the situation was on the ground? Well, it was about 2 months into it when COVID was first detected in the United States, and then just all bets were off, right? It was not just the presidential election now that was roiling things. It was lockdowns, schools closed, businesses failing, hundreds of thousands of people getting sick and dying. So, yeah, it became a much bigger story than anyone had anticipated.
And think about that. Never would a local newspaper be more necessary in a community.
It really is, and
you got it. People don't know what to do in a pandemic. Things are changing every 5 seconds. What is recommended, what is not, and for generations, people in McKeesport had the McKeesport Daily News to turn to have, and it's gone. It's gone.
There was a survey that I had seen maybe 20 some years ago that I think the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette had done. And it had concluded that something like in the Mon Valley from, let's say, in the Allegheny County part of the Monongahela Valley, that something like 1 in 4 houses was getting the Daily News. It was a penetration level that the Post-Gazette could only dream of in their coverage area. It was, and look, I worked at the Daily News for a year. I know what people in the community criticized it, probably as you can only criticize something that you love, right? They criticized it, they made fun of it, the Saley News, the Daily Shooting, the Daily Snooze. I heard every derogatory thing, but they all read it. They all got the paper. And to just have that just vanish at the end of 2015, it took me probably 3 months before I had the urge on the way home from work to stop and buy a paper. It was just automatic that, on the way home, I'm going to stop and get a paper. And, how do you unwind that? You had 130 years of newspaper tradition. How do you stop getting that overnight?
Oh, but Jason, you're forgetting that one of the things that created this mass murder of daily newspapers was technology, right? And it was technology that was supposed to step in. Remember, this was the information age. At the tip of my fingers, I can find anything I want. Who needs the Daily News?
Citizen journalism. I was on a panel discussion maybe 10 or 12 years ago at Carnegie Mellon, and it was There was an FCC commissioner, and there was a faculty member from Carnegie Mellon and a few other people. And what the faculty member told us was that citizen journalism was going to save us all. And we weren't going to need reporters anymore because, like you said, everything is at your fingertips. Why do I need a reporter to go to the school board meeting when I can just watch the school board meeting on YouTube? Why do I need a reporter to go to the planning commission when I can just pull the planning commission minutes up on my computer? No, we don't do, and I can post it on Facebook. I can post it on my Tumblr. I can post it on Twitter or Instagram or wherever. We don't need reporters anymore. But you know, and I know that that's not happening, right? You were
right.
a daily working reporter.
Yeah.
You know that there's nothing fun about going to the zoning commission or the planning board or the water commission or whatever. Nobody wants to do that for fun. What citizen is going to want to do that? Number one, and number two, what citizen is going to be trained to do that?
But we offloaded that to journalists who would keep us aware of what those who had power in our communities were doing with that power. Nobody's minding the store anymore. Nobody's
minding the store, and the other thing that you brought up is technology, and the city of McKeesport worked with the Tribune Review to acquire the old McKeesport Daily News building, and they are now using it as a small business incubator. And we have our office in the building right now. And when we had the ribbon cutting for it, you know, one of the things that I said at the ribbon cutting that is true is, hopefully everything I said was true, but one of the things I said at the ribbon cutting is true is that it wasn't that people didn't want to read the news anymore. It wasn't that the news became less important, and it wasn't that the Daily News was doing a bad job or any of these other 2,100 newspapers was necessarily doing a bad job. The advertising is gone. The tech companies, Facebook and Google in particular, are the two biggest offenders. Nice. Hoovered up all the advertising money. They have sucked the advertising money right out. Go through a Post-Gazette today. Well, assuming you can find one because it's 3 days a week.
Don't. Do not.
But look at the news. Look at the amount of advertising that they are struggling with. Right. Look at the number of ads. Look at any newspaper. Yeah. Look at the amount of advertising. You know, and it's not their fault that the advertising has just been vacuumed up by Google and Facebook.
That's right. Let me share with you something that Jim Hightower wrote. Mm-hmm. He said, and this I know because my mother lives in Green Bay, Wisconsin, mm-hmm. and the Green Bay Press Gazette, which at one time that was my first newspaper. It now is the most embarrassing rag I have ever seen in my life. And it turns out this is exactly the reason. Jim Hightower said, my city's daily newspaper has gotten so emaciated it should be in hospice care. Its front section is down to 6 pages, half of which are cheap ads, and nearly all of its articles are out of date, cut and paste pieces bought from out-of-state content providers. This embarrassment is put out by the Gannett chain. Mm-hmm. And Gannett has over 1,100 of these cadaverous papers pretending to be the news source for cities, including Austin, Texas. Austin, Texas, he's talking about, and that's a big, big city. Gannett is owned by a Japanese hedge fund. Mm-hmm. These hedge funds have been buying up newspapers, firing almost the entire staff, raising prices, selling off any assets the paper has, including pencils, and then they kill the paper.
Pittsburgh's papers actually look pretty good. I mean, the Tribune Review and the Post-Gazette are thinner than they used to be, but look like newspapers. They read like news. Go to Columbus, Ohio, and look at the Columbus Dispatch, which I believe is a Gannett paper. Go to Cincinnati and look at the Cincinnati Enquirer, which I believe is a Gannett paper. They're filled, as Hightower said, with 2 or 3 day old USA Today content. They're filled with very cheap looking ads. Don't expect to get the baseball score from the night before. Don't expect to get the football game from the night before, because in some cases they were printed in the early evening. So there's no way to get any kind of up-to-date information. Yeah, he's absolutely right. We are still a little bit blessed here in Pittsburgh. And that's right, there's no reporters.
Yeah, sort of, kind of. So the impact of this on our democracy is, you could ask any founding father what the impact would be on a democracy. It's devastating. And you have one chapter that I think absolutely addresses that kind of devastation, and it is the chapter that is headlined. Let me find the chapter, the headline. Come on, Cullen. I am such a ditzy mess today. I'll get it. Hang on there. I'll get it. How Facebook has undermined communal conversation in McKeesport. This is one of the chapters. If you could just tell that story, that this is now how people get their information. This is one instance in McKeesport that Jason elucidated.
Yeah, the incident in question, and again, there's a little bit of backstory, and that's that if you go to any community now has at least one person, and probably 10 or 12, who is running a Facebook page where they sit by the police scanner and they post calls off of the police scanner, which as a rookie reporter, I was told you never report anything you hear on the police scanner because 9 times out of 10 it's unfounded. But this is, the digital age now, and like you said, information is at our fingertips. So, and they call themselves like Newswatch or Community News Beat or, and a lot of times these people have very good intentions. I'm not casting any aspersions on. A lot of times they are very well intentioned. Some of the people are not well intentioned, but a lot of times they are. What they don't have, though, is they don't have the ability to check out stories. They don't have the ability to vet things for quality or not. And sometimes they, like I said, in a few cases they don't have good intentions. They are politically motivated to slant things in a certain way. And we can get into that in a second if you have time. But what happened in McKeesport was... What happened in McKeesport in 2020, we had a young transgender woman who lived in one of the public housing projects who was found dead on the sidewalk one morning. And there were 2 rumors that essentially started. The first one was that she had been murdered and that the police were covering it up for whatever reason. And then the second was that there was going to be a riot. That there was going to be a Black Lives Matter riot in McKeesport. Now, normally we would not report on a suicide, just newspapers in general, and we're not really any exception. We don't report on suicides for the most part. But in this case, I called the county homicide squad, and they said, look, we have video of her apartment. Nobody went in, nobody went out. We know that she had been struggling. We know that she had been depressed, and we believe it was a suicide. And the medical examiner's office ruled it was a suicide. So we reported that there was no foul play, there was no homicide expected. But the second rumor...
the gay community wasn't necessarily buying that, right?
They weren't necessarily buying that. And I can, look, in addition to being transgender, she also was Black. And the mistrust between marginalized communities and the police is well documented. Yeah. So you can understand why the Black community and the LGBTQ community would both say, yeah, but is that everything? Are the police really telling us the truth? So that was number one. Her friends, and she had a lot of friends because she had an Instagram following. She was well known as a hairdresser and makeup artist. So she had a lot of friends. Not just in the gay community, but in the wider community. They wanted to have a candlelight vigil for her to draw attention to her death.
Yeah.
That someone picked up on Facebook as there's going to be a riot. That They said that the McKeesport police are advising people to go home early, to board your windows up, to close your businesses. One of the neighboring police departments in one of the neighboring towns put out an advisory that they were going to be closing their streets so that the riot would not enter their community.
Wait.
I was literally.
Was any of that true? Was that true?
No, I was literally sitting. I was sitting in the police station, looking at the police blotter, and my phone started to, ping with these notifications. And I looked at the chief of police and I said, "What?" And he said, "That did not come from my office." He said, "You've been sitting here this morning. We have no such. We know that there's a march. We know it's going to be peaceful." He said the only involvement we were going to have was traffic control. So now I call the mayor, and the mayor has heard the same rumors, and he's kind of freaking out. He's like, "Wait a minute, what is going on?" So the police department ended up putting out a statement saying, "This is a peaceful demonstration. We are providing crowd control only." I talked to the organizers, and again, this is where I cross the line sometimes, and I hate it, but I have to cross the line sometimes from journalist to activist. I called one of the organizers of the protest and said, "Here's the mayor's cell phone. Will you call him, please, and tell him what's going on? Because the rumor mill has gotten out of control." And then we reported on the protest, and it was peaceful, and nobody was harmed. But that had the potential because it has happened.
No, harm was done.
The trust. The trust was done for sure. The trust was harmed for sure.
Well, that's huge. That's huge. And so these are the people. So do you know who was the person who made that up? Because you know the source, right? The source of it.
I don't know where it originated. No, I do not know where it originated. And I think again, this is where it's hard to separate the outcome from the intention. I have a feeling the intentions were probably good, and a game of telephone started, that somebody heard there's going to be a march, and someone changed march to protest, and someone changed protest to riot, and someone changed riot to, as it got passed along the rumor mill, it just kept getting, people kept adding juicier and juicier details to it, is what I think happened.
Because of their hate, their bigotry.
Well, that's true.
If you have black, gay, then you must have Antifa. I mean, people have been taught, it seems now, to make these connections.
One of the things I wrote about in that chapter, though, we had a good outcome. There was an incident that happened in southwestern Ohio very similar to this that was not a good outcome, and it was the same kind of thing. It was a peaceful memorial service that a bunch of, we'll go ahead and say MAGA or Trump supporters found out about. Mm-hmm. They started essentially the same rumor, and there was a riot. And the riot was caused by the counter-protesters coming in and attacking the peaceful demonstrators. Yeah. And this all started on social media. It all started on, and Facebook doesn't care. YouTube doesn't care. Their position is that they are just the conduits of the information. They can't help what people do with it. And their other argument, and this is the citizen journalism argument, right, is that if there's misinformation out there, then all you have to do is pump correct information, and that will cancel out the misinformation. But we know that doesn't work.
So, Jason, you say this too, speaking of now that we've gotten into this area. You say we all know about the gaps. You say there might not be another part of the country that is as sharply divided along racial and economic lines as the Pittsburgh metropolitan area. And then you go on to say, we know about red states and blue states and the divide between rural and urban. But you say around Pittsburgh and McKeesport, it's red streets versus blue streets, red suburbs versus blue suburbs. And although the stakes are smaller, the gaps between the two sides are no less real. And explain how you've watched that play out.
I think we've all had the experience of driving around the Pittsburgh area and seeing Confederate flags. And, the argument with the Confederate flag, for instance, is that it's celebrating Southern heritage. Well, what is the Southern heritage of Plum Borough or Elizabeth Township, right? When you're flying that flag in a white suburb in Pittsburgh, you're not flying it to celebrate your grandpap who fought in the Civil War. So what are you celebrating? And we've all seen, drive out Route 51 from Pittsburgh, and you can sort of tell as soon as you cross the county line, or as soon as you cross out of the city of Pittsburgh, you're in a different territory. Route 30, you drive the Parkway east until it turns into Route 30, and you can kind of see the same thing as soon as you cross into Westmoreland County. It's the anti-trans, anti-gay, anti-Black Lives Matter. The electronic billboard just over the Westmoreland County line that's notorious for these kinds of messages. And it does. It goes town by town. It goes on census tract by census tract. It goes almost street by street. It is an incredibly segregated area, and it's really only in the last 10 years or so that I think anybody is really talking about it.
You make some interesting points. So you're trying to sort of comprehend the sense of grievance, and these would be like the MAGA voters, the grievances of these people that you report on. And you essentially say that, the American dream sort of turned out to be a big lie to them. I think you say that corporate America left Western Pennsylvania a toxic mess, both literally and figuratively, and it stripped away our livelihoods and identities. And those people are, what? Angry, feel victimized.
From my perspective, I try not to use, and I'm not being critical or anything, but I try not to say those people, because those people are me people. Those people are people that, I was at a meeting last night, and probably a bunch of people in that meeting were conservative. Those people are me people. Those people are people that I grew up with, that I went to high school with, that I see in church or in the grocery store all the time. So I understand where the grievance is coming from. I understand where, if you live in McKeesport or Clairton, or grew up there, I understand where the grievance is coming from. You thought you worked your whole career, you did your job for 30 years, and at the end of that, you got a pension, and maybe you had enough money to send your kids to college and buy a boat or buy a cabin somewhere that you could retire to. And that in the 1980s and 90s, that went away around here. And it has never come back. We've had a lot of promises of job retraining, and we've had a lot of promises that technology was going to save us, that healthcare was going to save us. And it really hasn't. So it's not difficult to understand where those grievances come from.
And on the other end, you say this: everyone who is on Twitter or Facebook passionately arguing about the policies of Biden versus Bernie or Trump versus some third-party candidate, yada, 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 would do well to remember that those debates are a luxury that many young people in places such as McKeesport, Duquesne, and Clairton aren't able to indulge. They are too busy focusing on their day-to-day survival.
We have a huge problem, and it's just not just the Mon Valley, the AK Valley, the Ohio Valley, any of these river towns up and down, whether it's Ambridge and Aliquippa or it's Rankin and Duquesne and Clairton. The health outcomes are terrible. Poverty outcomes are terrible. Multi-generational poverty in some cases. And what we know from statistics and from the census is that the greatest predictor of whether or not you are going to be impoverished has now become your zip code. It was the zip code you were born in is your identifier. That's whether or not you're going to get an education, whether or not you're going to escape poverty. It is where you were born. It's generational, and it's not a problem that you or I are going to solve, that's for sure. But it is definitely a problem of neglect that has trickled down from the top, from corporate America and from sort of the internal Beltway class. They don't care except around election time and except in how they can motivate people to vote for one side or the other.
You say something that really blew me away, because I've been confused. I'm always astonished every year when the numbers come out and it turns out the Pittsburgh area has lost even more population. Mm-hmm. And this is even though we have these laudatory articles written about how this great, ability to recreate ourselves from steel to eds and meds, and we got Google here and that there, and we've got some of the lowest. We have high quality culture and all this other stuff, low housing prices. Why wouldn't people be flocking to us? And you say a lot of things, but one of the things you say...
That's what my wife says. You say a lot of things. I do say a lot of things.
You say a lot.
Some of them are even accurate.
Yes, one of the things you say is, I started to wonder whether the Pittsburgh region continues to lose population because we have made ourselves unwelcoming. That's a big thought.
I have thought this for a while, and, when I talk to especially people who are not originally from this area, and especially if they are black or if they were born outside the United States and English is not their first language, or if they are LGBTQ. I mentioned in the book that I asked a coworker who had just moved to I think he had grown up, I want to say in Wisconsin, but was black and had moved to the Pittsburgh area. Mm-hmm. And I said, what do you think of the Pittsburgh area so far? And he said, the city's fine. He said, outside Pittsburgh, it's northern Alabama. And, how many black folks around here have had the experience of getting followed around in the store just for the crime of being black, or being stopped by the police, or, again, driving into a neighborhood and seeing a giant Confederate flag? Well, what message is that sending to the young black person who, has just taken a job at UPMC or Carnegie Mellon or one of the tech companies and is looking for a house? Don't move into that neighborhood. I mean, that flag is there specifically to send a message. This is not your neighborhood.
You're not wanted.
Yeah, you're not wanted.
Yeah,
and again, you can do all the image campaigns and all of the billboards at the airport, and all of the really slick TV commercials on the Steelers games. Visit Pittsburgh and the Pittsburgh Allegheny Conference and whatever can do all of the great advertising, the image advertising they want. But if someone drives into the area and that's their first exposure is the Confederate flag, they're going to just keep on driving.
So, Jason, you come up with, and I really think that you've hit the nail on the head. You say it's not economic reasons. You suspect it's not economic reasons that are bedeviling us. It is cultural and ideological ones that are depressing our growth and our future. And you really think it is getting close to irreversible, don't you? You don't have a lot of optimism, I get the sense. Or is that...
Why am I still here is the question.
Well, yeah, and I realized that you were writing this, this was at the, beginning of the pandemic when nobody was feeling exactly positive. But, things have, I don't know. Yeah, why are you still here?
That's a good question. Why are so many of my fellow graduates that I went to high school with not here? I don't know. I think the example I use in the book is, pilots talk about a plane going into too tight of a spiral, and there comes a point at which the spiral just keeps getting tighter and tighter, and then the plane crashes because it can't recover. When I talk to people around the area, especially employers, and I'm interviewing them, the common thing, especially in the Pittsburgh area, is that we don't have enough young people to fill the jobs that we have. We heard that with the Shell cracker plant up in Beaver County. They don't have enough jobs. U.S. Steel, for all of its downsizing over the years, is constantly hiring steel workers, construction workers, building trades. None of these places have enough employees. So it's not the job, it's not the job market. We have historically low unemployment in Western Pennsylvania. It's that young people are not moving here, and the ones that come here for school are not staying here. And to me, we can talk about taxes and we can talk about government and we can talk about all the things that kind of get pointed to as problems, but the economic numbers seem to work out for Pittsburgh. So there must be some other factor. And to me, I think it's a cultural factor, and I think it's this latent racism. And at some point, you eat your seed corn, and you can't grow anything new.
Well, I just think, wow. And thank you for that, and thank you for this book. It's called American Decline: Reporting from 4 News-Starved Towns in the Trump Era. It is put out by Columbia. And,
American Deadline, just in case.
What did I call it? What did I say?
Decline. American Decline. That was a Freudian slip.
Yes, it was. Okay, American Deadline, and I want to say I hope that you're able to get back to full-time reporting sometime, because we need you. We need people like you, but there's no platform for you. Damn it.
We keep plugging along. We keep plugging along in our little pop stand.
Well, God bless you. You're one of the good guys, and I thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. Thank you, Jason.
Well, I thank you. Thank you for your interest, and take care.
Okay, you too.
Bye-bye.
Okay, Jason Togyer, ladies and gentlemen. Ain't no newspaper for him to work at. That's it. I'm sorry if that's depressing, but reality. I like to think that, unlike Fox News, we deal with the reality that exists. And that's the reality. And I think he said it as well as anyone ever has. So thank you so much. And I'll be talking to you Monday. You have a good weekend. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.